technology and analysis methods over time. So it is clear that in the criminal justice system, money brings the possibilities of advancements. DNA testing proves that while there have been many innovations in the field, we can expect even more in the future. Everything starts with advocacy and promoting the power of DNA testing by revealing the wrongful conviction cases. With widespread knowledge of DNA testing, we can trust that even more funds will be provided for the expansion and improvement of DNA testing analysis. Thank you.
I think it's great that you looked at the cost of wrongful convictions. Often, one of the arguments that I'll hear from people who are skeptical of wrongful convictions and their prevalence as a problem is, well, what was he doing there anyway? He probably did something, even if he didn't do this. Best to get him off the street. And the argument that I love having in my quiver is that of the budgetary concern. Wrongful convictions have cost the state of Illinois a lot of money, and I think it's wonderful that you discussed it.
Good work, Samantha. Thank you very much. Thank you. And John's our next to last presenter.
Hey guys, I'm John Lesnick. I did my research in the UK and the US on prosecutorial misconduct. So, what is the problem? My good friend Larry David. As you've heard from many of my peers, there are a number of different systemic factors that impede on individuals' constitutional and human rights in our system of criminal justice. While each of these factors, if changed, have the propensity to reduce the number of miscarriages of justice, there's one other factor that in my studies I found not only has the ability to remedy itself, but to remedy other parts in the arena of criminal justice, and that's prosecutorial misconduct. We have a little diagram here of how the criminal justice system works in the United States. As many of us already know, when a crime is committed and or reported, the first people on the scene are going to be the police. From there, the evidence is going to be sent over to the DA offices, where prosecutors are entrusted with seeking justice for the victim or victims. After prosecutors decide to bring charges, the case moves into the courts. In the US, prosecutors are not supposed to partake in any part of the investigations, not to say that they do. If they so choose to participate, they consequently forfeit their qualified immunity from criminal and civil proceedings. In reality, the number of prosecutors who choose to cross the line and commit misconduct versus the number of prosecutors who are actually reprimanded is exceedingly low. One study in California found that of 700 cases of clear prosecutorial misconduct, only 6 resulted in sanctions from a state bar. Nothing civil or criminal came about. Now let's shift over to the UK. Each of these branches in the UK is pretty similar to how it works in the US in theory, at least. But once we leave the magical land of theory, we find a system that is far more interested in seeking the truth than it is in seeking convictions. The policing role is pretty similar to the US. It is the same in most of continental Europe. Police investigate, police collect evidence, and they send it over to prosecutors. But from here, though, things change quite a bit. Prosecutors have a far more integral role in the investigative process. The CPS, or the Crown Prosecution Service, assists in vetting evidence to make sure that it is factual and admissible in the courts. This difference is generally a positive one. However, some cases like the Cardiff 3 have highlighted the downside of prosecutorial involvement in investigations. If the CPS decides that there is enough evidence, they will move to bring charges and the case will move to the courts. Next, we have the culture in the US. The US system of justice is adversarial in nature. In the simplest form, it's just to say that there are 2 opposing sides to each case, a defense and a prosecution. It's sort of, in a way, kind of similar to warfare, and that's going to come into play a little bit later. Our system is extremely politicized. The tough on crime stance is a result of officials wanting to cement a strong public record for potential future public office bids. But it's not just that. The way in which we view different crimes and their severity has more to do with the ethos in the upper echelons of certain government agencies than the view of the general public. Judges and some district attorneys are actually elected into office, which means that they are playing a dual game when their title demands that they focus solely on uncovering the truth and promoting public safety. Prosecutors in the United States are generally not the most highly regarded public servants. And that's not to say that people don't respect them, they're just not the most highly regarded. And they're also just underpaid lawyers. The culture in the DA offices across the nation does nothing to shortchange this notion, which is in part why the job of prosecutor is oftentimes a gateway into more lucrative corporate jobs. Most frightening of all is that there's really no accountability in the DA offices. No one is held accountable when miscarriage of justice is occurred. And on to the UK culture. Contrary to the adversarial system in the US, the UK system is far more inquisitorial. The UK system of justice seeks to uncover the truth and to promote the overall wellness of society. There's quite a sense of collegiality among prosecutors in the UK. It's kind of a little bit different than it is in the US. This might be best attributed to the fact that in the UK, prosecutors argue both for the defense and the prosecution at different points in their career. Not only is this able to foster long-lasting relationships, it is able to relatively do away with the winner-takes-all mentality that is so prevalent in our U.S.'s adversarial system. There are no elections for judges or prosecutors in the UK. Judges are crown-appointed officials, while prosecutors enter the CPS as they would any other job. They attain position and rank within the CPS by putting in their time and proving themselves worthy of advancement. Unlike the US, being part of the CPS is more of a life track, as opposed to being an intermediary job. And finally, on paper, there's far more institutional accountability for misconduct than there is in the US. All members of the CPS can be potentially sued either criminally or civilly with regards to their misconduct. However, the instances of this occurring are far and few. Where the UK system excels is in mitigating misconduct. It achieves this because of decades spent fostering and nurturing an inner culture that promulgates proper conduct, accountability, and the search for truth. So how do we fix our system? I found a couple solutions that might be able to help. I have a few solutions that can potentially help to mitigate misconduct with slowly fostering a more responsible and truth-seeking prosecutorial branch in our nation. We need to do away with elections of judges and prosecutors. It is time to switch over to a system where judges are appointed and vetted by a separate council, somewhat similar to like the Supreme Court justices, and where DA offices become more far removed from the politics of local government. Local officials should no longer appoint DAs. Instead, a meritocracy should be instituted within DA offices where prosecutors are hired as they would at any other job and rise in rank based on merits. The second solution is a two-parter. In my research, I found that one of the biggest problems in the States is the lack of a proper prosecutorial culture. The way we can change this is by implementing the doctrine of command responsibility within the DA offices across the nation. We saw in the UK that what has led to far less misconduct is a more evolved and mature culture. A way we can achieve this here is by making DAs fully responsible for both their actions and the actions of their ADAs. This means stripping DAs of all immunity from both civil and criminal proceedings. The implementation of this doctrine could help ensure that supervisors develop an atmosphere of compliance by training subordinates to avoid misconduct. Perhaps civil and criminal suits won't be extremely prevalent, but it only takes a few big cases to both consciously and subconsciously reassert the boundaries in which prosecutors operate.
Someone else as a shooter, and he was convicted. They gave the documents 2 years later to a co-defendant, and he went to the courts and ended up staying in prison for 10 years until he was finally exonerated by the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals here. And it's amazing because the prosecutor had the documents, knew he had the documents, held on to them for 2 years, gave them to the co-defendant in his later trial, and there's nothing you can do about it for him right now because of immunity. So that is the real effect of prosecutorial immunity, and it's something that lawyers are definitely working to chip away at in the courts. So, amen again.
Thank you, Jen. Great job.